A very good day to all of our viewers and those who are listening via Second Advent Radio. Welcome to Marriage Encounter. We are delighted to be with you on the airways over the various social media platforms. And Marriage Encounter, we discuss all things marriage. We are delighted that you are with us. With me today, Dr. Greene is Pastor Staton Adams, and we are so happy that Pastor Adams is back. Pastor Adams, welcome again to Marriage Encounter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greene, and good day again to all of our friends, listeners, viewers, and we are always delighted when this time comes around to share with you from our depth of knowledge and our own experiences, and the whole intent is to help you to improve your relationship, your marriage, your family. And so call up somebody, as we usually say, tell them Marriage Encounter is on, and we are ready to go.
That's right. That's right. So we're going to go into our discussion, but before we do so, let us bow our heads for a word of prayer. Pastor Adams, would you lead us in a word of prayer?
Sure. Our Father, again, we thank you for this very important moment that we have to share with our friends, our viewing audience, those who are listening on these very critical areas of marriage and family life. We just know that you have so much of a high ideals for the family and that the enemy is after the family. We just pray that the information we will share in time here will really lend to the strengthening of our marriages, our unions, our families, and that as a result, your name would be glorified. And this institution that you have ordained to be such a blessing to humanity and society, Lord, will truly be a blessing to us as we seek to really live in accordance to your will and plan for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor. We have been discussing the issue of conflicts. We're looking at different types of conflicts, of course, marital conflicts. And we have been sharing about the whole concept of when you recognize that your partner, your spouse, has some degree of immaturity or brokenness. And we have been addressing various things that you ought to do. We indicated that you need to, one, accept reality. Two, you need to communicate your support to your spouse. Three, face issues as real problems. Four, own your problems, don't deny them, and then last week we were talking about the matter of having a plan. You don't just want to say we're going to work on getting better. You want to have a solid, concrete plan, who's responsible for what and how you're going to get help. We spent a lot of time last week, Pastor Adams, saying that we sometimes need outside help. And it is important that we recognize that there are some things that are too big for us and that we don't need to seek professional help. Now, we're going to move on from there, but I just want to review one or two things here. We did indicate that the importance of recognizing that help is needed. And that when we recognize that help is needed, we need to both agree as to how we're going to get the help. We also recognize and said quite strongly that your in-laws are not the right persons to help you when you're having marital conflicts. They do not qualify to help you. That's so very important. I've gotten feedback already, Pastor Adams, on this, and individuals. And by the way, those of you who from time to time meet us in the public spaces, whether it be in the supermarket or the bank or somewhere else, and just say how Marriage Encounter has been meaningful to you. We really do appreciate that, and we encourage you to keep sharing those comments. So I've been getting some positive feedbacks. Individuals are particularly happy that we are addressing this vexing issue of parental interference. Yes.
Sure, me as well. We've been getting some real, in fact, one lady said that she religiously turn on and get the rebroadcast when she's driving home. And another elder has already referred 3 persons to me. I've already started working with 1 person as a result of listening to Marriage Encounter, because people think that, in fact, the lady who told me said that your this is information that people pay for. Really in professional information that people pay for. And she says that thing, and yeah, I was in a particular place, and the lady said I was talking, I know that voice, and lady saying, well, I was in the bank, yes, and the lady said, I know that voice. I wasn't so sure it was Marriage Encounter or the radio, because we have a radio program here as well. So yeah, when we share information of this nature, it is very, very valuable, and people really want this kind of information. And so we were saying the last time that get the plan, and you need outside help sometimes, even if it means therapy or whatever intervention you need. It is all worth the effort, the time, and the resources. I think there is where we ended the last time.
Yes, and we want to pick up from there. And again, it is your marriage, and you have a right to work to save your relationship. This is important. This is your business. Sometimes you hear individuals saying things about, nobody going to make me do that. At the end of the day, this is your marriage. You need to work to save it. So once you have the plan, you want to make sure that it is not one-sided. You want to make sure that you do not go saying that your spouse has a problem. In other words, treat this as a mutual thing.
Yes.
You're not going to say, I'm going to look help for my wife, or I'm going to look help for my husband. My marriage has an issue, and we want healing to take place. Mutuality is important. I like to say this, Pastor Adams, that anytime in the relationship we find ourselves competing with one another, it's my fault, it's not your fault. I'm winning, you're losing. If we both win, then the relationship wins. If one wins and the other loses, that's a failure for the relationship. We have to think about mutuality. We have to think that it is a relationship. You are not married to yourself, you're married to your spouse. And you ought to see each other as equals. If there is an issue with one, then there's an issue with both.
Yeah, and that's the overall principle, because actually we are talking about conflict here, right? That's the overall principle. And when you come to the end result, and the means does always justify the end. The end result here, we are talking because this person is your other self. And if your other self is not comfortable, if your other self feel hurt, feel put down, because some people make the conflict or come to the solution in that way. I won and you lost. It's not a win-lose. In fact, I was sitting in my classroom, and I think when we were dealing with conflict, I don't remember if it was Dr. Kiss or some other person said, if you have a lose-lose option, you still have a problem. If you have a win-lose option, you still have a problem. You must come to a win-win option. I am happy, you're happy, both of us are happy. Because if that's not the case, it's going to come back again at some point, right? We must all be working to that. Both of us have won. This is not a contest that I'm trying to eliminate you, because we're a team, right? And we established that the last time. And worse yet, when you approach the conflict or the situation not being mutual, that you are the problem person, and then you actually preface it by saying, so you always statement, or you can never get it right, and you are the one who is always causing a problem. Anytime you use that you statement alone, that is saying that you are separating yourself from the other person. The better sentence construction, the language, I think as I perceive it, as I see it, I think we have a problem here. So the person know that this is inclusive. You're not even though it's clear that that's the other person's issue, really, they have caused the problem, and that is like I say to Pope, man, if you notice you're wrong, like 2 left side shoes, confess, right? But I recognize that we have a problem. You're striking at mutuality right away. It's not me versus you.
Those of us who are into family life education and counseling, we do from time to time consult various sources. And I remember reading, I think it is Self and Seeley, and they stated that whenever a marriage fails, it is never the result of just one person.
Mm-hmm.
It is important. You may see a fault in your partner. That does not mean that you do not have a fault yourself.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the moment you begin to think that my partner is responsible for this, that is adopting a kind of selfish mentality, which in itself is
Mm-hmm.
challenging. So again, we are suggesting that you look at the whole concept of mutuality here. Consider that you're on the same team. You know, you don't have team members competing against one another. Well, sometimes that does happen, and lots of times when that happens, the team loses, because if on a basketball team, one person
Mm-hmm.
is trying to see if they're the only ones who could score the goals, you know,
Yes.
they're not passing the ball, they're playing selfishly. That is
Mm-hmm.
going to result in the team losing. You have to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that you need each other, you need the support, you're going to have to be there for one another. You're going to have to pull up your socks and act like a team and not as a one-man show.
Yes, and so even though this situation might be noticeable, you know, and the for you, in this case, be it the husband or the wife, the problem is much more noticeable. Um, okay, it is very noticeable. It is a common thing, but it doesn't mean that you don't have issues as well, and that you don't need any maturing or you don't have any growth experience to gain, because we are growing together. And in fact, one of my authors, as I read, it is, in fact, I have a presentation, a seminar presentation on growing together. I actually named it that way, growing together through conflict, right? Because both, I didn't want the participants to feel, yeah, that, okay, oh, you're the one, you're the problem one. Both of us need growing. All of us have been affected by sin, and you can't be such a peach that you don't have any growing to do, that you don't have any issue, right? Both of us need to grow. And so, and sometimes I might have some more growing to do in this particular area than you, but yet you may have some growing and maturing to do in this other area, right?
Well, you know, I like to make reference to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and what happened when they sinned. You know, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, they discovered that they were naked. They realized that something was wrong. They tried to help themselves, but knew that they were not capable. And when they heard God, they hid. But notice what God did. Now, clearly, Adam and Eve were in the wrong. God could have said, let them suffer the consequences of their action and just turn and go about his business. But instead, God went seeking after them. And I like to take the principle there, Pastor. The principle here is that if you are in the right, if you really think you're in the right, you have something called responsibility. You know, take initiative, go seek help, so that when Adam and Eve were lost, were in a position where they could not help themselves out, God went after them. He took the initiative. And what I want to say to couples, if you recognize that your spouse has an issue, you're going to have to recognize that, listen, this relationship is broken. Notice I'm saying the relationship is broken. You're not saying my wife is broken or my husband is broken. You're saying the relationship is broken and I'm going to have to try to do something about it. We need to work on this together. When you think we in the relationship, you're thinking success. When you think I, then that's failure.
Yes. And we would find that, you know, just the area of communication, because we alluded to that last week. Well, we made the point last week, and it is always good to go back and then come back, refresh what we were saying. Expressing your feelings and confronting an issue, all of those are communication skills. And if you recognize that the problem is there and it is not being made mutual, just because of how somebody has communicated the problem. And so that's why I used the illustration earlier, and I alluded to the point that the communication has to be of such that you know that the person is on board with you, right? It is a mutual something, right? And because sometimes we take a person's flaws or weaknesses, and so instead of communicating the positive side, we always communicate the negative side. We never say anything that is positive in relation to the. So even when the person has a weakness or some flaw, you have to balance that by talking about the positive side, because it just always can't be negative alone. That puts the person in a position to know that, well, here this person is in partnership with me, and it makes them more open for us to have this conversation, because they have not just come with the negative component alone. They have not only been being denigrating and putting down my fault and making disparaging remarks and statements alone. They have balanced it off. They like, I admire or appreciate this and this and this and this, but these and these area, I think that we really need to do some work. How can I help you? For so that I can grow, so that you can grow in this particular area. So that kind of balance, you see. So all of us need to grow as to how we confront and talk to each other if either of us have a fault and no need to grow in a particular area.
Now, I want to make reference to a scripture passage, but before that, consider for a moment, husband and wife, and one of you get into a vehicular accident, right? Now, if your spouse gets into a vehicular accident, when you get the news, do you say, well, she's on her own, he's on her own? Do you even say, I always tell them not to drive that fast, you see? It's their business. You don't do that. You may have had a conversation like that before. You may have said to your spouse, listen, you drive too fast, you need to slow down, etc. But when the accident does happen, if you are a loving and caring spouse, you are going to be concerned. You're going to want to know what's the situation. You're going to drop whatever you're doing. You're going to rush to the hospital, to the emergency room, wherever. You want to be with your spouse in a moment of crisis. And you want to, I cannot imagine, Pastor, an individual hearing that their spouse got in a serious accident and they just said, well, my spouse is an adult, they could deal with that. That would be very uncaring.
Right. Well, you see, because Paul says, now you are two, now you're together, you're one. And so what affects the other? What is it? It don't even have to be an accident. I could illustrate. One night my wife, Carol, came home late at night, and those were not the days when we had all of this technology. And I'm talking about years ago story. She had just started working, and she was at the office, and I was miles away from where we were actually living. She has to travel and come home, and 8 p.m. and I think there was a power outage that time. So and my cell phone that time we didn't have this sophisticated cell phone. We had the old type of cell phone, and so and I am getting pacing the house up and down and getting concerned and emotional, and I am at the front door, and I have the two little children with me, because we had the two first ones, and I'm worried, well, why is she not home at this time? And there's no means of communicating now because there's power outage, and so and I can't get it all. And I breathed a sigh of relief when I heard a vehicle stop in front of her, and I saw her emerge. I mean, so it doesn't have to be something like that. The two have become one,
That's right.
anxious and you want to know, well, this is not normal, but she's all usually home. And when she comes, and says, so and so, I didn't even remember that. One of the staff workers were leaving and they had a little girl was leaving to go overseas, and she she didn't get to communicate that to me, So yeah, the two have now become one, right? And if one is suffering, then so is the other.
And that is the principle behind what Paul addresses in Ephesians chapter 5. Husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. Now, that is quite a statement. You ought to love your wives, husbands, as your own bodies. And the Apostle Paul says, listen, ordinarily, on a normal circumstance, nobody hates their own body, but you feed your body, you care for your body, and you're doing this because you want good for your body. Well, when you get married, you love your spouse equally. And so it is in this context that, again, we're going back to this thing. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. And Paul says here, again, that he is using an illustration, something that will reflect the way Christ relates to his church. Now, in terms of a theological principle, Pastor, what Christ did was that he gave himself for the church. He died for his church. That ought to be the level of love between husband and wife, so that if there is a problem, you can't just divorce yourself from the problem and say, that's not my issue, that is my spouse's issue, let my spouse handle it. Because you love, you want to reach out and you want to care for your spouse. And in that moment of reaching out and caring, it may clearly be a situation where your spouse has some challenges, but you know what it's going to mean to your spouse when they recognize that, they have some challenges, but you are there with them. You are speaking as though it is not their issue, it is our issue. That is going to bring about a kind of appreciation. It's going to grow the relationship, and that's just one of the benefits.
Because and grow the relationship in the very critical way, because there is where the stronger emotional attachment and bonding is able to take place when somebody knows that you actually love them in that kind of a way, because this is the other part of yourself. So if the other part of yourself is uncomfortable, if the other part of yourself is not happy, if the other part of yourself is hurt, if the other part of yourself is pained, you mean, it is something, right? You see, so that is such a crucial thing, because it's not just the conflict situation, but it is not just, you just don't grow in your problem solving alone, but you also grow in your intimacy when this is happening, because you have not dealt with this thing in a destructive way. And going back to John Gottman, he says that when we deal with these conflicts situation in a destructive way, it is depleting the bank. And he was just, well, I'm using that term because I read another, Dr. Barbara Angelis, she talked about depleting the bank. But what he was actually saying that, and he introduced it by talking to the 7 horsemen, not the 7, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And
yes.
Then he was saying that these destructive ways is just a recipe for the marriage going down. In fact, these are the predictors that the relationship will fail. It's just a matter of time when. You see, so there are tremendous benefits to be arrived at when you put in the time and put in the resources to get it right. How you resolve these things, how you talk to a problem, how both of you own it, how you you have to look at the bigger picture to see how the overall relationship benefits as a result, because it's not just your skills in conflict and communication, but also you are growing in the area of intimacy, which is the key area of growth in the marriage, because you have a lot of because I said in 2 broadcasts, two programs, if you're not growing together, you're actually growing apart. and intimacy is not a place that we arrive at. I think Albert was had said that it's not a destination. Every stage of the relationship, every season of the marriage, this experience of intimacy is central to the experience, right?
Now, I want to say this because, if you don't invest in your relationship, if you're not seeking, Pastor, to support your spouse, you said just now that if you're not growing together, you're growing apart. Now, for those of you who are listening right now, some of you may be saying, well, my relationship is all but dead. But I want to suggest this. If you don't work out your issues in your relationship, and you go to another relationship, you are going to have more issues. You're going to have compounded problems. What you are doing when you decide to work on resolving your conflicts, you are making yourself stronger. I remember when I went to primary school. I still remember when I went to primary school. In mathematics class, Pastor, they gave us aids. We used to have to get either stones or the covers for some of the soft drink,
Yes,
soda drink,
bottles. Yes, I know.
and we, in our own term, we used to call them cola stoppers, because it was, the Coca-Cola company, so we'd call them cola stoppers, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
you're doing some simple math problems. What appears to be simple to us now, 3 plus 5. And the teacher would tell us, count out 5, count out 3, put them together, and then count and see how much you get. And those were problems that appeared to be difficult for us. But as we learn to solve those problems, we became stronger. And after a while, you look at 3 plus 5 and you don't have to think, you don't have to count your finger to say it's just automatic. So as you overcome one conflict, you become stronger. And after a while, that doesn't bother you anymore. You perfect a kind of thing, you're using going towards intimacy. You're learning each other and you're riding the wave successfully. And after a while, you become an expert. So it doesn't bother you anymore. And that's what you want to do. You want to be able to work on these things together so that you become stronger.
But I've heard some people say, okay, if that's the case, some people may not necessarily separate, even though they're growing apart. They still appear to and remain married, but what type of marriage it is. So we don't want the people to go to the extreme either, because you can say, all right, there's a marriage type that is called the passive congenial, where you're just there. We're living parallel lives, but there's no interaction, there's no spark, there's no fire, there's no intimacy there, right? That is not what you want, right?
At all.
It's not a peace treaty like two countries. So you're talking about solving a problem, resolving conflict in such a way where the relationship is restored. You just don't want to, just for us to keep the peace, I will go my way, you will go away. So no. You want whatever happened, the relationship must be restored, that you are back together at one. That is what the apostle is saying, right? Because together now you both are one. So
Amen.
If there's a conflict that has drifted, and it happens in a relationship, like early in the relationship, and that's why we were talking about in-laws, like early relationship, you might have several conflicts to deal with because you're now adjusting, you're now getting to know one another better, because you really didn't know each other during that 1 or 1.5 years or 2 years. And in my case, I had about almost 6 years of courtship from the time I knew my wife, because I had to go to college and then come back, and then she was there when I was back. So we had all that time. But when you're married and in the same space, you still don't know each other, so you're gonna have conflicts.
Guess what? Our time is up. We're gonna have to.
Our time is up.
Right there.
Oh my!
That's
Our time
right.
is up.
It's an interesting discussion, but we have to stop here now Next week, we're going to go on to another type of conflict. We're going to be discussing hurt feelings that are no one's fault. But that's interesting, but we have to stop here. So that's all the time we have for today. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to drop us a line, marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. May God bless you. Until next time.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.